I was lying awake at 3 in the morning, the kind of restless insomnia where every shadow in the room feels sharper, every sound from the street outside a little too loud. My laptop screen glowed faintly on the desk, frozen on a YouTube rabbit hole I'd abandoned an hour ago. I'd switched it off, sworn I'd sleep, but my brain was stubborn. Instead, I grabbed my old iPhone 4. It hadn't been used in years. The thing was practically a relic, heavy, clunky. Its screen spider-webbed with tiny scratches. The battery barely held a charge, but sometimes I'd turn it on just to scroll through the photos. College parties, blurry selfies, playlists with titles I thought were deep at 19. It was nostalgia, nothing more. That's why the sound startled me. A notification ping, that soft ding unique to iMessage. Froze, thumb hovering above the screen. This phone had no SIM card, no service. It wasn't even connected to Wi-Fi. Yet there it was, a new message. I swiped, half expecting the system to crash. Maybe some phantom notification cached in the phone's guts. But it wasn't a glitch. It was a real text. A blue bubble with a timestamp, 3:01 a.m. The sender's name glowed in the header. I stopped breathing. It was her name. And the message, just 5 words. Simple, childlike, familiar. In a way that made my stomach twist. Why did you leave me? For a moment, my heart convinced me it was possible. That she was alive. That maybe it was a cruel prank. Some hacked Apple ID. I tried to rationalize, but my body knew better. My skin prickled, ice flooding through my chest. Because she had been dead for 3 years. Dead, buried, gone. And yet my phone, this outdated fossil I'd dug out of a drawer, had delivered me a message from the grave. I stared at it until my vision blurred. The logical part of me whispered explanations. Data corruption, spoofing. Some bug buried deep in Apple's ancient servers. But the other part, the one I couldn't silence, reminded me. No one else could know the words she sent. They echoed a private conversation, one we'd had the night before she... No, I'm getting ahead of myself. This wasn't the only message. It wasn't even the worst. If you're still listening, remember this. It started with one text, but it didn't stop there. And I need you to understand exactly how it unfolded. Because once you hear it, you'll never look at your phone the same way again. But first, let me rewind. When I tell you I wasn't looking for anything strange that night, I mean it. The only thing I wanted was distraction. My apartment was too quiet, my thoughts too loud, and the glow of my main phone felt suffocating, like every notification demanded something of me. That's why I dug through the drawer under my desk and pulled out the old iPhone. You know the one, chipped edges. A home button that sticks when you press it too hard. The kind of device that feels impossibly heavy now compared to the glass slabs we all carry. I hadn't touched it in years, but I remembered charging it a few weeks earlier out of pure boredom, just to see if it still worked. It had clung to life with surprising stubbornness, powering on with that familiar Apple logo, like a ghost of its former self. Scrolling through it was like opening a time capsule. My camera roll was full of grainy snapshots of faces I hadn't seen in forever. Old friends, exes, the kind of people you swear you'll stay close to but don't. Nights out where everyone's cheeks glowed red from cheap alcohol. Road trips where I thought the world was endless. Blurry screenshots of memes that probably don't even make sense anymore. It was comforting. In a strange way, it felt safer than the present. I laughed at some of the old playlist names. Midnight Anxiety. Songs to pretend I'm okay to. I cringed at my old selfies. The ones I thought looked mysterious, but now looked like I hadn't figured out what to do with my face. There was something sweet about it, though. For a little while, I felt like I was borrowing someone else's life. Someone dumber, lighter, untouched by the heaviness that would come later. That's what makes what happened harder to explain. The phone shouldn't have been able to do anything more than store those memories. The SIM was long dead, the account disconnected. This device was a fossil. If it worked at all, it was only as a museum exhibit of who I used to be. And yet, as I scrolled, I noticed things that didn't quite fit. A few photos I didn't remember taking. Blurry ones too dark to make out, shapes I couldn't identify. I dismissed them as corrupted files. Years of being tossed in drawers, exposed to dust. Maybe the data got scrambled. That's what I told myself anyway. Still, a part of me couldn't shake the unease. There's something intimate about finding a picture you don't remember taking. Like someone else was holding the phone, looking through your eyes. But nostalgia is a powerful drug. I let it wash over me, ignoring that gnawing feeling. I told myself it was harmless. That this was just a harmless late-night trip down memory lane. So when the phone buzzed, when that unmistakable iMessage ping shattered the silence, I almost dropped it. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't supposed to be prepared. This was an old brick of a phone, not a living thing. But the screen lit up anyway. And that's when the past stopped being just a memory and started bleeding into the present. The first time, I just stared at the screen, frozen. My thumb hovered above the glass, and for a full minute I didn't dare move. The name glowing at the top of the screen made my chest cave in on itself. It wasn't just any contact. It was her. I hadn't seen that name light up in years. I had never deleted the thread. Maybe part of me couldn't. It was like some fragile memorial I kept hidden, tucked away in an old device I never expected to use again. She'd been gone for 3 years, and yet here her name was as fresh as the night she last texted me. "Why did you leave me?" 5 words. That's all it took for the air to change. The room suddenly felt too small, the corners darker. I told myself it was a trick, some technical hiccup. Maybe the phone glitched, spitting out fragments of old conversations. I even tried to remember if she'd ever typed those exact words before. She hadn't, I knew she hadn't. My throat was dry when I whispered, "This isn't real." Saying it out loud was supposed to break the spell. It didn't. Another message slid in beneath the first. "You promised you wouldn't." I dropped the phone onto the blanket, staring at it like it might crawl toward me. My heart hammered so loudly it drowned out the quiet hum of the fridge down the hall. Logic fought against instinct, both clawing for control. It had to be a prank. Someone hacking old accounts, spoofing IDs. But even as I reached for explanations, my gut knew better. The words, the phrasing, they cut too close. These weren't just sentences. They were reminders of things we'd said to each other in the privacy of late-night calls, secrets nobody else would know. Against my better judgment, I picked the phone back up. My hands trembled as I tapped the screen, opening the thread. My reflection in the glass looked pale, sunken. I typed back before I could stop myself. "Who is this?" The typing bubble appeared instantly. 3 little dots pulsing like a heartbeat. I bit down hard on my lip, tasting copper. The bubble flickered, stopped, returned. Then another message. "You know who I am." I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Every instinct screamed to sever the connection. Power it down, bury it back in the drawer. But fear has a way of tangling with curiosity, and curiosity always wins. "This isn't funny," I typed. "She's dead." The reply came before I could even blink. Dead where? Not here. Something inside me cracked. Because as much as I wanted to dismiss it, a part of me, the desperate, guilty part, ached to believe it. I hadn't said her name aloud in months. I hadn't visited her grave in over a year. And now here she was, answering me through a device that shouldn't even have service. I racked my brain for possibilities. Maybe her old number had been recycled, reassigned to some stranger who thought this was hilarious. That was possible. Terrible, but possible. Then came the third text. "Remember the last thing you said to me?" My blood ran cold. Because I did. I remembered every syllable. And no one else had been there to hear it. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard to type. The phone buzzed again, harder this time, like it knew I was hesitating. Say it. Say it again. I clutched the device against my chest, heart racing. I couldn't look at the words anymore. They burned into me, as if the glow of the screen was etching them beneath my skin. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to stop at one message. It wasn't going to be a glitch I could laugh off in the morning. This was only the beginning, and I should have turned the phone off right then. I should have ended it. But instead I whispered into the silence, "Okay, then prove it's really you." The typing bubble reappeared, and what it sent next made me wish I'd never asked. The reply came in fragments. Not a sentence, not even a word at first, just an image. My screen went white, then resolved into a photograph. It was me. Not from years ago, not one of those cringy selfies buried in the camera roll. This was current. My hair the way it looked now. The shirt I'd worn that evening. I was lying in bed, phone in my hand, staring down at the screen, exactly as I was doing in that moment. The timestamp read 3:14 a.m. Seconds earlier, I scrambled upright so fast I nearly dropped the phone. My eyes swept the room. The cracked blinds, the desk cluttered with empty cans, the closet door ajar just enough to show dark slats. Whispered no, 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 over and over, a mantra against the impossible. Another buzz, another image. This time I was turned toward the window, except I hadn't turned yet. I was still staring at the first photo. It was like the phone was showing me seconds into the future, or worse. Like someone was here photographing me in real time. I shoved off the bed, heart hammering against my ribs. My first instinct was to check the locks, the windows, the hallway outside. Nothing. Silence except for my ragged breathing, then another ping. I never left. I slammed the phone face down on the desk, but the vibration rattled against the wood anyway. My rational brain, desperate to anchor itself, whispered about malware, spyware, camera hijacks. But this was a phone that shouldn't even connect. No updates, no service. Who could possibly worm their way into this fossil of a device? The next message wasn't a text. It was a call. The screen glowed with her name. The tone, default, cheerful, sliced through the air like mockery. I froze, thumb hovering above decline, but I didn't decline. I couldn't. Against every instinct, I swiped to answer. Static. A hiss like an old radio station buried in snow. Then faint, broken syllables threaded through the interference. Got you hear me? My knees gave out, and I sat hard against the wall. Who is this? My voice cracked like I hadn't spoken in weeks. The static thickened, then cleared just enough for a sound that wasn't words at all. Breathing. Wet, uneven, shallow. And then my name, whispered in the exact cadence she'd used the last night we spoke. I hung up, threw the phone onto the bed as if distance could protect me. But the moment it landed, another buzz rippled through the mattress. New messages flooded the screen, one after another, stacking on top of each other, too fast to read. I forced myself closer, eyes scanning the blur. Phrases emerged. "You left me. It's cold here, you'll know soon." And then, nestled between them, "Check your photos." My stomach dropped. I opened the gallery with trembling fingers. Dozens of new pictures had appeared. Each one was me. Me in the kitchen. Me brushing my teeth. Me standing outside my own door, staring up at the peephole. Images I'd never taken. Angles I couldn't have captured. Dark humor bubbled up, bitter and sharp. Guess I've got my own personal paparazzi. The laugh stuck in my throat and died, because the last photo silenced me completely. It was me sleeping. Taken from above, as though someone stood at the foot of my bed. The caption underneath, because somehow there was a caption, read, "Soon you'll be here too." I dropped the phone. This wasn't just about a ghost text anymore. The device wasn't a vessel of nostalgia. It was an open door, and something had stepped through. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time the phone buzzed, I flinched, but I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't risk missing something important, some clue about what this really was. Instead, I sat there in the dark, telling myself I'd figure it out, that I'd trace it back to a logical source. By dawn, I was no closer to peace. The messages slowed, then stopped. My apartment looked normal again, as if nothing had happened. Sunlight made the corners less sinister, and exhaustion dulled the edges of my fear. But one thing gnawed at me, sharper than the rest. I hadn't been the only one, because buried in that flood of notifications was a single line that wasn't addressed to me at all. "He's watching you too." Who he was, I didn't know. But I intended to find out. When the sun finally broke through the blinds, it should have been comforting. It wasn't. The light didn't erase the words on the screen, or the photos now sitting in my gallery like parasites. I told myself I needed to know. Needed proof I wasn't the only one. Because if this was just happening to me, then maybe I'd already lost my mind. I booted up my laptop, fingers jittery from too much coffee and too little sleep. The first search was blunt. iPhone messages from the dead. Google spat back tabloid articles and parody blogs. The kind of stuff you scroll past at 2 a.m. But buried deeper, in old threads from years ago, were fragments that made my skin crawl. Does anyone else get texts from people who aren't alive anymore? It's always around 3 a.m. for me. Same for you? My Photos app keeps updating with pictures I didn't take. I leaned closer, pulse quickening. The posts weren't jokes. They weren't written like memes or hoaxes. These were confessions, raw and panicked, typed by people who sounded just as desperate as I felt. But the strangest part, many of the threads ended mid-conversation. Replies cut off half-sentence, accounts deleted. On one forum, the entire page was locked with a note from the admin. Content removed by request. It was like watching footprints vanish in fresh snow. Someone or something was scrubbing away the evidence. Reddit was worse. I found an archived no-sleep post titled, "The Call That Followed Me Home." The OP described an ancient flip phone ringing with their dead brother's voice. They uploaded screenshots of text logs, grainy, low quality, but familiar. Same timestamps, same wording. The comments were full of speculation. EMF bleed, grief hallucinations, digital hauntings. But the post itself had been locked, tagged, removed. No reason given. Every discovery only led to more questions. Why were the stories so similar? Why were they being erased? And who was doing the erasing? That's when I stumbled across the forum. It didn't have a name, just a string of numbers for a URL, hosted on some decaying server from the early 2000s. The interface looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. Black background, neon green text, the kind of place you'd expect to find conspiracy theorists shouting into the void. But the posts chilled me. The devices aren't broken, they're anchors. The dead cling to circuits like barnacles on a hull, never answer if it calls. That's how it pulls you through. I scrolled for what felt like hours. Stories from all over the world, all with the same beats. Old technology, dead loved ones, messages that grew darker with time. One user claimed to have smashed their phone with a hammer, only to find new messages on their laptop weeks later. Another said they buried the device in concrete. It still rang, and then, nestled between the threads, I found a post that made my blood run colder than anything else. If you're reading this, it's already chosen you. I slammed the laptop shut so hard the desk rattled. My breath came shallow, hands pressed into my knees to stop the trembling. Ping, my head whipped toward the old iPhone. I hadn't touched it in hours. The screen glowed on its own. One new message waited. Stop looking. I see you. The room seemed to shrink. My chest tightened, heart stumbling in its rhythm. The timing was too precise, like it knew exactly what I'd been reading. I backed away from the desk, every instinct screaming that I'd crossed some invisible line, that by digging into the stories I'd painted a target on myself. But the worst part wasn't the text, wasn't even the phone. It was the reflection in the darkened laptop screen. For a split second, just behind me, I swore I saw another face. I didn't move at first. My reflection in the laptop screen stared back at me, wide-eyed and pale. But behind it, just for an instant, there had been someone else. A shape, a face. When I spun around, there was nothing but the quiet clutter of my apartment. The sagging couch, the cracked blinds, the old coat draped over a chair like a slumped body. The iPhone buzzed again. The sound jolted me like an electric shock. I grabbed it without thinking. A new text glowed against the cracked screen. "You're still here." I dropped the phone onto the desk like it was hot. My heart galloped so hard I thought I'd pass out. This wasn't just messages anymore. This thing, whatever it was, knew what I was doing. It was watching, and then my laptop woke up on its own. The screen flashed white, then black, then showed a folder I hadn't opened. It was called Photos. My cursor moved without my hand. I yanked my fingers off the trackpad, but the cursor still glided. Clicking open the folder, dozens of images spilled across the screen. They were all me. Not just selfies or screenshots. These were surveillance shots. Me brushing my teeth, me at my desk, me walking down the hall to my apartment door. Some were grainy like security camera stills. Others were crisp, like someone had been standing inches from my face. The timestamps were the worst part. They weren't from the past. They were from the last week. I whispered, no, this isn't. Another ping from the iPhone. I snatched it up with shaking hands. We're so close now. I backed toward the door, scanning the apartment as if I'd suddenly noticed the hidden camera, or the stranger crouched in the shadows. The walls felt thinner, the air heavier. I tried to call someone, anyone, but the screen glitched before I could tap a contact. My main phone froze, the icons dissolving into static, and the old iPhone screen flickered like a dying star. Then a call came through. Not a number, not a name, Just a black screen with a pulsing white circle. It rang once, twice, I answered. At first, only static hissed in my ear, then faintly a voice. Wet, glitchy, layered like two recordings playing at once. Do you hear me? I swallowed hard. Who are you? The breathing on the other end quickened, matching my own. Then, the voice was hers. And it wasn't. Words stretched wrong, like rubber rising and falling in pitch. I tried to hang up, but the screen wouldn't respond. My thumb slid across the glass over and over. Nothing. And then the voice said my name. Slowly. Tenderly. A chill like ice water poured through me. Stop, I whispered. Stop. The voice shifted, sharper now. Come here. I hurled the phone across the room, struck the wall and slid to the floor, but the call kept echoing from the speaker, tinny and distorted. Come here. Come here. Come here. I backed into the kitchen, heart hammering, clutching a knife from the counter even though I knew a blade couldn't cut static. My laptop chimed. A new window popped open. It was a text document. Blank except for one sentence typed in black letters. You took something from me. I slammed the lid down, but the iPhone lit up again where it lay on the floor. Another text, remember the night at the bridge? I did, God help me, I did. The memory hit like a blow, knocking the air out of me. Her standing on the edge, the water black below, me reaching, saying words I'd regretted ever since. The secret I'd never told anyone. This wasn't grief playing tricks. This wasn't a prank. This was punishment. I snatched up the phone, yelling at the screen. What do you want from me? For a long, horrible moment, nothing. Then, to show you, the screen flickered. Images cascaded faster than I could register. Her face pale and waterlogged. My apartment from angles no one should see. A dark space lit by a single flickering bulb. Then a final image. A door. My door. And beneath it, open up. A soft knock rattled the wood behind me. I spun. There was no one there. The hallway beyond the peephole was empty. But my stomach turned as the phone buzzed again in my hand. You're not alone. That was when I realized whatever was inside that phone had spilled into everything else. The walls seemed to warp. Shadows shifted even when I stood still. My own reflection in the microwave looked a half-second delayed. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. I didn't know what would happen if I did. Another knock, louder, and then a final text. Let me in. The knocking didn't stop. It came steady, patient, like someone who knew I was trapped on the other side with nowhere to go. Every rap against the door made my ribs tighten until it felt like my own chest was being hammered. The iPhone buzzed again, and against every shred of instinct screaming, don't. I looked, incoming call. FaceTime. Her name, I almost dropped it. But my thumb twitched and accepted before I could stop myself. The screen came alive with a blur of static. Shapes formed, distorted, then snapped into focus just long enough for me to understand what I was seeing. Her face. Except it wasn't. Skin pale, stretched too tight, eyes blacked out. Leaking dark static that bled into the frame. Her mouth moved half a second out of sync with the sound. You left me. My knees buckled. The kitchen floor rose up cold beneath me, but I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen. You said you'd stay. Her voice cracked like broken audio files. Jagged and doubled, both familiar and wrong, I whispered. This isn't real. The corners of her mouth curled into something that might have been a smile, if not for the way her teeth stretched too long. Then why do you hear me? The feed jittered. Behind her, the background shifted. Rooms I half recognized. My old apartment. The bridge. The water. Then suddenly the camera angled upward and I saw my own living room. Same couch, same clutter, the faint glow of my desk lamp, and then the camera tilted down toward the door. My door. A knock echoed in perfect sync with the one I was hearing in real life. I shot to my feet. Phone clutched so hard the edges dug into my skin. "What do you want?" Her face leaned so close to the camera that her blurred features filled the screen. Eye sockets swallowing me whole. You know, the screen pulsed with static. And for a moment it wasn't her face I saw, it was mine. My own face staring back at me, pale and shaking, whispering words I couldn't hear. Then the feed cut. The call ended. I didn't breathe. Couldn't. The silence pressed in until the phone chimed again. One last text sliding onto the screen. "Come outside." I backed toward the window, yanked the blinds apart. My breath caught. There across the street, under the sickly orange glow of the streetlight, stood a figure. Still, waiting. Phone in hand, screen glowing faintly. Even from that distance, I could feel its gaze drilling through me. I yanked the blinds shut so hard they cracked. The phone vibrated again. I forced myself to look. A photo, taken from outside. Through my window, me pulling the blinds closed. I screamed, hurling the phone to the ground. The screen splintered, but the glow didn't fade. The last message burned across the glass like an afterimage. "This isn't the end." For a moment, silence. Just my ragged breathing. The hum of the fridge. The ache in my throat. And then, softly, impossibly, the sound of a notification pinged. Not from the iPhone. From my laptop. From my main phone. From every device in the apartment. All at once. I pressed my back against the wall, eyes darting from screen to screen, each one lighting up with the same phrase, "We're not finished." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about a single phone. It wasn't about old technology or nostalgic relics. It was me. I was the anchor. And anchors don't get to choose what they pull up. I didn't sleep. Not that night. Not the one after. I've lost track of time since then. Days blur. Nights stretch too long, and every sound, every flicker of light feels like it carries a hidden message. I tried everything. First, I shut the old iPhone off, held the power button until the screen went black. But the silence didn't last. My laptop lit up on its own, showing that same pulsing notification bubble in the corner. Next, I smashed the iPhone. A hammer, one good swing, glass splintering across the floor. For a second, it felt final, like exorcising a ghost. But that night, my main phone, my brand new, fully updated phone, buzzed on the nightstand. The message was the same. "Why did you leave me?" It followed me to work. Emails I never wrote, sent from my own address. Files appeared on my office desktop. Photos of me typing, eating, staring blankly at the monitor. Coworkers asked if I was okay, and I wanted to laugh in their faces, scream at them that no, nothing was okay. That the dead were clawing through the glass of every screen I touched. But I said nothing. 'Cause once you tell someone this story, you drag them into it. And I couldn't do that. Not again. I even tried going offline. Turned everything off, pulled the plugs, killed the Wi-Fi. I thought I was free for maybe 2 hours. Then my TV crackled on by itself. No input, no signal, just static. And buried under that static, faint but unmistakable, was her voice. "You can't run." I wanted to believe I was losing my mind. That would be cleaner, wouldn't it? Breakdown, hallucinations, trauma bubbling up in ugly shapes. But then I looked at the timestamps on the photos. They matched. They aligned too perfectly with things I hadn't told anyone. Reality itself was complicit, so now I write this. Not as an explanation, not as an apology, as a warning. Because here's the thing, I don't think I'm the only one. When I dug into those forums, those threads, those vanished posts, they weren't just stories. They were warnings too. People like me, pulled into something they couldn't escape. And every time the traces disappeared, not because they were fake, but because the thing inside those devices doesn't want you to know. So why am I writing this? Why am I posting it here where you can see it? Because if I don't, then I'll vanish too. And maybe this way someone will remember. Maybe someone will believe me when I'm gone. But you need to understand something. This story isn't finished, not for me, not for you. Even as I type this, the messages haven't stopped. The old iPhone is long gone, but the buzzing follows me like a shadow. Every device I touch becomes a mouth for the same voice. Ping. I just got another one. I shouldn't look, but I always do. Curiosity and dread are the same thing when you've been marked. It says, almost there. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's a countdown. Maybe it's a promise. But I know this. When I started, I thought it was about one impossible text in the middle of the night. Glitch? A cruel trick of memory and grief? Now I know better. It's not about the phone. It's not about her. It's about the tether. And once you've felt the tug, once the line is hooked under your skin, there's no cutting it free. So if you're hearing this, if you've stayed with me to the end, do yourself a favor. Don't check your old devices. Don't scroll through those dusty photos. Don't listen for the ping in the dark, because once it starts, you'll never unhear it. Ping, there it is again. Another message. I shouldn't open it. I know that. But my hand is already moving, my thumb already dragging across the glass. The screen lights up. It says, your turn. And then, as I stare at the words, another sound cuts through the silence. Your phone, buzzing right now.